Hey, hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Back to the Blockbuster. My name is Gaius Bowling, and of course, I am joined by my co Owen. What's up,
Let's
buddy?
go. We have a full house today,
So
guys.
we do have a very full house today. So we usually record on Mondays. We have a very special episode this week because on March 10th, it'll be the 25th anniversary of the television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So we wanted to do an episode to kind of honor that show and its legacy and kind of talk to other fans of the show, kind of see what the show has meant to them over the years and how they discovered it and all that fun stuff. So, looking at screen here, we actually have a family member of some Back to the Blockbuster on tonight.
Yes, we do.
It's Owen's sister, Jeanette. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, nice to meet everybody. I'm doing pretty
Very
well.
nice.
Just, I think I'm here because I'm the only person Owen knows who's ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
So the reason that I asked, the only reason that I asked Jeanette on because I remember days and days of high school days where she was locked up in a room binging all of the Buffy episodes. So it's just something that I recognized. And once Gaius said that he wanted to do a episode about Buffy, I was like, I know exactly who to call. So we got a super fan on there, and excited to hear her input.
yeah, excited to give my input.
And so then we have Hayley Knight, who is just a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Actually found her in a Buffy fan group on Facebook. And she is coming in all the way from the late or early there, depending on how you look at it. But just want to say hello, Hayley, and thank you for being on tonight.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm going to promote other than my Buffy.
Yeah.
Let's get to that. And then we also have, so it's, I want to get it right. It's Kara, that's correct, right?
That's right.
That's correct. And so Kara and Steph are part of, so I needed a couple more people to, and thankfully it was a duo. I actually found them by searching the hashtag Buffy the Vampire Slayer on Instagram, and their Prophecy Girls podcast popped up, and I sent a message to them today, and they were also willing to be on, which I'm very excited to have you both. And if you guys wanted to kind of describe what the podcast is about, that'd be great as well.
Take it away, Kara.
So our podcast, Prophecy Girls, we're on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok, prophecygirls.ca. We have a Discord server. We are a Buffy rewatch podcast where Steph and I have both watched the show many times before, but we're keeping our discussions spoiler-free with the exception of certain bonus episodes. So even if you're new to Buffy, you know, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, okay, I'm 25 years late to the party, this is the time. Now is the time. You can listen from the beginning. You can start with episode 1 and join us on our journey. We're just finishing up season 3 right now. We started our podcast a year ago this Friday. So we are 1 year in, kind of in sync with Buffy. And it's
Nice.
a lot of fun because we are hardcore fans of the show, but it's been 25 years. So it's definitely time to kind of critically reevaluate it.
Yeah, that's kind of the key of our podcast is we look at it from a feminist 21st century lens. And I think a lot of people are responding to that because it is time to rewatch and critique, but also keep what we love and celebrate what's still there, what's still great about the show.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, I would agree with that because, you know, a lot of these things have changed over time. Certainly not the same as it was in like 1997 when the show premiered, and even during most of its like 7-season run. So it is interesting. I'm curious, like what has watch kind of been like for you guys so far with the series?
It's a lot. We talk every episode, we talk about how the characters change as we get older, right? I mean, just case in point, Giles is way hotter to me now, right, than he's ever been before because I'm older. Xander does not fare well in a 21st century light at all, which was a shock to me because it's been about 7 to 10 years since I rewatched last. So yeah, we discuss this all the time. So it's going really well, but it's like a roller coaster. It's a lot of emotions in there. Like, oh, I don't feel the
Neither
same,
of
or I
us
feel
were plugged
exactly.
into the fandom when we first started this either. So, and I would really be curious about Hayley's perspective on this as a fandom representative. Like, we were not prepared for Bangel and Spuffy and just
Oh,
especially on Instagram
yeah.
and TikTok, the comments we get whenever we
Yeah,
post.
the fights,
certain
the
things.
fights. I feel like
They're
a
still
referee.
all these years later.
Yes.
Yeah, those
It's still a
ships
big deal.
are a serious ride or die relationship.
I've chosen a ship, just so everyone knows. You have no choice but to
Oh,
choose.
oh, yeah. We will definitely get to that. And then lastly, we have. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just have a question? But as you get older and you understand the dynamics of the relationship, you realize it's a bit like, oof, I can Buffy later.
Yeah, it's a little like, especially when you're watching it when you're younger and it's like a teen show and you're watching it from that perspective, the high school years. And I've actually I rewatched the show in 2020 when everything kind of locked down, and it definitely, I still love it, but it definitely has changed as far as some of its themes. They definitely resonated a bit differently today than they did back then. And then I just want to introduce Rickey Z, who has the coolest name on the screen here.
Rickey Z.
Z. Also found in I think in a Buffy fan group on Facebook as well. And thank you for being on. And I know you said that you have a podcast as well, and I want to give you a chance to kind of promote that too.
Well, thanks. Well, I am podcast manager and social media manager, but I co-host another show called Geek It Out through Wonderly Media. So we talk about just a bunch of different things that we're all kind of into, where it's me and we're all kind of like eclectic with what we're. So like I'm the fandom Buffy Vampire Diaries fan, and a lot of them are like Wheel of Time, really big into the comic books, things like that. So it's a fun little. We usually air on Mondays.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, you know, the good thing is that you're in a circle of fellow nerds here, I think. So like you're in good company.
Yes.
So this should be a very fun chat. So I just want to, just in case anyone's listening that doesn't know anything about the show or like the basic plot, I'm just going to give like a quick little rundown of what the show is about, and then I'm going to kind of go to each of you to kind of ask you kind of when you first discovered it and kind of what you thought about it at the time, and then we can go into like more details about characters and themes and all that stuff as well. So for those of you that don't know, Buffy is a supernatural TV series based on the 1992 film of the same name and is created by John. Series follows Buffy, the latest young women known as Slayers, who are chosen by fate to battle against vampires, demons, and other forces of darkness. Buffy wants to live a normal life, but as the show progresses, she learns to embrace her destiny. Buffy is aided by a watcher who guides, teaches, and trains. Unlike her predecessors, she surrounds herself with a tight inner circle of loyal friends who also helps her out. The series premiered on March 10th, 1997, and it received critical at the time and has really spun off into its own kind of fan with comic books, novels. There's fan films. There are some schools that actually teach the philosophy of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It influenced a lot of shows of similar types that came after it. Owen, you didn't really, your sister watched it more than anything.
Yeah, so I am super interested. My main focus for this one that I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, I'm probably the only one who's not a fan of the show. I didn't really see it, so I just can't wait to hear kind of what your guys' input on it is, mainly in the sense of, for me, it seems like Buffy was kind of the first one of this sort of vampire lore, making shows that now have appeared on the Sci-Fi Channel, Supernatural, all of those kind of shows, I feel like became successful because TV realized that there is this niche market of nerds out there who want to find out about this kind of thing. And then obviously it was before Twilight and before I think vampires became like sexy and cool. And so I kind of want to know like what your guys' opinion on, if you guys think that it pretty much inspired this whole spin-off section of like very niche market sci-fi, but also kind of really starting off the vampire like wants and love and all that kind of stuff. I was just wanted to get your guys' opinion on that.
All right, cool. All right, Jeanette,
I
we will
feel
go
like-
with you first. Oh yeah. You can go. Never mind.
I don't
Sorry.
know. I feel like Anne Rice would have something different to say about that. I mean, granted, it's not
Yeah.
Anne Rice didn't
Ooh.
write TV shows,
Yeah.
but
That's
know.
true. But that's a very
Right.
literary. Like that's for girls and boys and people
Yeah.
who read books as opposed to
yeah.
being actually on TV, very easy to stumble across as opposed to going to a library and checking out specifically a book.
That's true.
But
But I
so
think the
it's a
interview
little-
with the vampire movie probably had a lot of a much wider audience than Buffy did, at
Yeah.
least for the first few years of Buffy, because Buffy was explicitly marketed to a younger audience, whereas you had all that star power in Interview with the Vampire. That I think, yeah, it's not necessarily accurate to say that Buffy was the show that made vampires cool and sexy. I think Buffy was the show that demonstrated you could have, vampires or whatever you want to be cool and sexy for teens, and create a show aimed at teens that talked about teen issues seriously while also having a lot of fun.
Right. I want to piggyback off that because that's a good point. The one of the things that the show gets a lot of credit for is that it uses the whole like supernatural like formula. So there's demons and vampires.
Gaius, did we lose you?
One giant metaphor for like growth. A lot of the things like Joss Whedon says like the one big thing that goes through like the first 2 seasons is that high school is hell, and like he literally just like I'm gonna put the high school and the town above a hellmouth, and like that is like what I'm trying to say that this kind of like adolescent growing up is like for these kids, but then use like vampires and demons and something cool to kind of tell like this kind of teen coming of age story. And I think at the time there wasn't a lot. I mean, I don't want to speak on this because I'm not a woman, but I think at the time there wasn't a lot of shows like this aimed at women either. You had like Xena Warrior Princess, but like something like Buffy was a little bit more grounded, and like Buffy felt like she might be more like girls could relate to her more than like Xena. There's a more of a relatability factor there, and so I think that's in that sense I think it kind of paved the way for that kind of storytelling, and having like this kind of cool like genre show that also said a lot about growing up through each season that that progressed. And that's kind of, I think in that sense I think it was like the first of its kind in a lot of ways, especially because it was on a network that was aimed at teens. Like the WB network was at the time when Buffy premiered there wasn't a lot of teen programming on the WB. That for them, it was their first big significant like hit, and then but from there I think they kind of built the network around Buffy a bit, and then you got other shows, you got like the Dawson's Creeks, but then you got stuff like Charmed and things like that kind of piggybacked off of the success of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I think in that sense it kind of was the first of its kind in that arena. In the teen market to really kind of explode the way that it did. Which kind of seems like, we talk about how like certain things aren't that, like something like Interview the Vampire, that movie was more successful, but I guess for like teenagers that were watching Buffy at the time, like there was something else that mattered more than like catching that show every Monday or Tuesday whenever it aired. So, for that market, it was big for them. I guess I would say.
What I think can be really respectful about the show is that, yeah, it's for teenagers. Yeah, it's written for women in a lot of ways. And it's campy. It's very campy, especially that season 1, but it doesn't dumb it down for that audience at all. It's an incredibly clever show. It's snarky. It's funny. It's got like the writing that, like the first time we've ever really seen that overarching series writing where they knew what they were going to do, at least for the first 5 seasons, where a lot of these shows you saw at the time came in. They're like, I guess they figured it out every second episode what was going to happen. Not Buffy. Buffy respected its audience. As Joss Whedon, as problematic as that man is, he had a vision for the show, and he never dumbed it down. He always knew that Buffy's feelings were real. The experiences her and her friends were going to go through are legitimate and things that people can relate to. And that's why, like you said earlier, the high school is hell metaphor, it's just as much high school as it was hell. And that's why people kept coming back. They're like, I see myself in this girl who not only dates the wrong guy and like is worried about what she's going to wear to this club for 16-year-olds, but she also has to save the world, and her prophecy is to die. Like, it's just like, it's some like good meaty stuff in there. And I think that is why Buffy stands out apart from all the other shows that were happening at the time. No one's ever seen anything like that. And the impact was incredible for us, obviously, as fans 25 years later, but for new audiences that keep coming back, like, there's so much to find in Buffy.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. There's like, you discover so much more. Yeah. What was that, Hayley?
Go for it, Hayley.
I don't think to me that across in the UK on BBC. James Things WB, one of the more accessible channels for younger. And the previous Buffy, like, I have seen a lot of different and I'm wondering, but they were the cartoons or some for the dimensions, and I think Buffy for me was like the first most relatable superhero that across my class, and it made me like, this could be me. I relate. I have these feelings. I go through these emotions. I go through these themes. And I think that's what has made her so popular. As completely relatable as the character. Has superpower to save the world. She's got so many dimensions to her as a character, and all of the characters do. I think that the characters evolve, see it like I've watched it a million times. I just finished another reason, and the characters change over time. Anya, for example, like she's probably and her sarcasm. And always she had a thing. And it's like it, and so it has that to it, and I think about it has this sort of long term. But not many other shows have had.
Yeah, I agree. They're like that first season, that 13 episodes, because it was a mid-season replacement. It replaced a show called Savannah that my mom used to watch. It was a soap opera, primetime soap. And so my mom was very yeah. She was very upset that this vampire show, which she later watched, she later got into it, replaced her precious Savannah. But you know, it had like those 13 episodes. Looking back on it, that first season, it is more of a like monster of the week kind of show in the beginning, even though there are some that kind of like play out throughout that first season, particularly with like Angel, and then you have like Darla and the Master and stuff like that. But like Jeanette, I'll ask you first, like that first season, like looking kind of back on it, like what do you think it kind of still holds up as something that kind of like pulls you in enough to like keep watching, or do you think the show got like progressively better and that's kind of what kept you into it?
So I do have to be honest, I have not rewatched Buffy for a couple of years, but I am one of those people where if I am not a fan of the first few episodes, I just won't continue. So, and I honestly really enjoy a Monster of the Week format. Like, obviously, I love a good overarching story. Like, there has to be continuity to it, so it isn't just like some sort of Twilight Zone, like new weird thing every week. But I love a good monster of the week. I love the hyena episode. It's really awkward and
It's really
really
awkward.
bad. But also, like, that's what some people in high school were like. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, they were horrible and awful and tried to eat people, which is slightly different. I didn't know anyone in high school who did that, but I did know plenty of mean kids. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like that episode specifically does not lend anything to the overarching story, but it resonates in my mind and I still enjoy it.
I ever saw, actually, because I didn't watch the show from the
no.
start. I watched it back in '97, but I didn't catch on to it until they were like rerunning episodes on the W at like 2:00. And so that was the first episode I watched. And I wasn't entirely all in on it because I was like, I don't know, this doesn't seem but what grabbed me right away though is that there was some solid like character development, and the way that the writing, the way that they wrote the characters, they had a firm grasp on who they were. And then the actors playing them also seemed like they had a firm grasp on like who those people were. And at the time I didn't know what episode number that was. And it's still pretty.
So that was pretty early on that they kind of solidified those characters.
Yeah, and then if you go and when I went back to finally watch, the pilot, like the first 2 episodes, and it doesn't take long for like Sarah Michelle Gellar, Allison Hannigan, Nicholas Brendan to kind of like get into a groove where like you can tell there's like early chemistry amongst that core group of friends. And, it takes a little bit for like the Angel stuff to kind of work itself out. Honestly, until he gets his own episode that season, like I wasn't convinced about that either until like I was like, all right, now I get it. And then like there's people like Cordelia who you just love to hate because she's not the nicest person.
No.
Love to love Cordelia.
Love to love Cordelia. Cordelia's our queen.
Yeah, Cordelia. Yeah, I mean, like you guys mentioned the whole like snarkiness and stuff. Like that character is like the embodiment of that, and gets some of the best lines of her run on that show.
Cordelia is underrated.
Are so clever.
Yeah,
yeah,
she's brilliant. Cordelia. She just thinks differently than the other characters, and that's okay. I would say that season 1 does a lot of world building. It does a lot of establishing the world around us. What is Sunnydale? What are vampires? What are they going to be facing every week? Like that's why 12 episodes is perfect to set that up for us. I would argue that what draws people in is that very first scene in the pilot when we see a schoolgirl, little blonde girl, go to make out with this guy she met outside somewhere in the school, and she's the timid one, she's the scared one, and then it subverts itself. She's the demon, she's the danger here, and she kills the guy. And that's just saying right off the bat, this is not a show you've ever seen before. The girls are not going to be the victims that we are used to seeing in these 90s horror movies. So
wow, that's frightening.
Well, what I also appreciate about that is that they made her girly. They made her silly and blonde, and she wore dresses and she wore crop tops, and she talked about how much she loved dressing up, and she kicked ass. So she was able to have that depth to her, whereas a lot of shows would have made her either very one-dimensional airhead, or one-dimensional like sort of like tomboy, bad butch, like hard ass stereotype. And I appreciate that they were willing and able to create a character with that level of depth, which then makes her more relatable, because no one is just an airhead. No one is just like the
mean girl.
The mean girl. Like everyone's got several layers to them.
And speaking of just have to guess class, which is something sort of like 12, 13. In like the miniskirt and the crop top and the fashion, and then she went as weekend Buffy and the boots and the trousers and everything. Just thinking like more than you can, it's not going to be as good. But beforehand, they have their costume.
Mhm.
So then you can be who you can be dressed who you want to be, who you want to like, who you want to be and express yourself. That's when
Yeah, you can definitely see yourself in every character. Kara and I talk a lot about how every character has flaws, right? There's no perfect character on that show. In fact, most of them do stuff that like we really question here and there,
Yeah.
like in various levels. But it's true, like just like real people, right? Everyone has flaws, and they're all over the 7 seasons, 7 years. They're put out there for us to critique and look at, and that's why this show is lasting so long. Is because there's more layers. The more we watch, the more layers there are, and that's what keeps us coming back.
Cara, do you have an
There's so much to
example?
talk about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have an example, Cara, of one of the things that Buffy does that's like very questionable? I know you guys don't do spoilers on your show, but we are spoiler alert for this one. If you want to tune in here, you can tune into some spoilers.
I mean, let's just start with the fact that Buffy's policy on who counts as a monster and who gets killed is wildly inconsistent, right? And if we bring up a character like Anya, Anya's this 1,000-year-old vengeance demon who's been killing men, and there's probably some collateral damage of other genders there for a millennium. But now Xander has the hots for her, so that's fine.
She lives.
She gets a pass.
That's fine. That's fine.
Doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
Her
Or when
first name basically doesn't count anymore.
But also, like, Buffy just puts her friends through the ringer. Like, I don't think there's any member of the Scoobies, which is the name of the gang of friends who are around Buffy, that Buffy does not mistreat at some point in the show, especially in season 6 and 7, when she's
all sad.
She's back from the dead. She's just very bummed out about being back from the dead and just depressed and everything.
I think I'd be too.
Sorry?
Same.
But I think I'd be too.
Exactly.
The only person she can relate to is another dead person named Spike, who's a vampire.
Yeah.
And she just really like treats everybody so poorly at various points in those seasons, to the point where in season 7, everybody kicks her out of her own house.
Yep, they all turn against her. Yeah.
Yes.
They all turn against her. I forgot about that. Yeah. It's interesting what you said about Buffy too, because how she picks and chooses like who's a mom and who dies. They kind of hint at that too when like Kendra comes on the show, and she makes it clear to them that like Angel is a vampire. Like he's your boyfriend, and he has a soul, but like he is someone that could eventually become dangerous. And of course, we don't know that's coming. Like we were like, well, no, he's helped them out. Like last season and a half, like what's he gonna do that's so bad? And of course we find out like he has a soul, and if he has one moment of true happiness, which is making love to her, that he will lose his soul and evil, which I guess is one big walking metaphor that sometimes if you sleep with guys, they will turn on you. Like
was this an abstinence say by WB?
A little bit,
No,
yeah.
my opinion is it's a Madonna whore thing by Joss.
Wait, elaborate.
Go on.
So there's this idea in critical theory, right, that there's something called the Madonna whore complex, where women in literature and media are allowed to be Madonnas, so they're pure and just and innocent, or they're whores, so they're slutty and they sleep around and they're sexy and they're sultry. Those are the two roles that women are allowed to play, and that's kind of what Joss Whedon is playing with in season 2, where there's so much iconography prior to that, right down to the white dress in Prophecy Girls season 1 finale. Buffy is pure and innocent, and that's why she beats the evil master. And then in the middle of season 2, she sleeps with her boyfriend. She has sex. She loses her virginity, and her boyfriend turns evil because she's crossed that line from Madonna to whore, right? And one of my theses as we watch and rewatch the show and think about it critically, especially knowing what we know about Joss Whedon now, and I'm sure we'll get into that at some point.
Yeah,
one of my theses is that Joss Whedon likes to punish women. He likes to punish all his characters, but he especially likes to punish women. And we really see the seeds of that in season 2 with what happens with Buffy and Angel.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a crazy dichotomy right there.
Yeah.
But
It's
also
interesting.
that first episode of her being at college when she sleeps with that guy, and then he goes off and talks about how he had this great one night stand and how he doesn't care about her as a person, and then that entire episode is about punishing him.
Yes.
Which
I think that's a much better example of the metaphor of guys can turn evil when you sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So there is that.
They learned.
Yeah, so there is that like sort of Madonna, like the virgin, the slut sort of thing, but he also made sure that like the guys kind of fall into that category too. Like Angel is also sort of the Madonna for a while when he has his soul, and then he sleeps with her, and then he turns evil.
Yeah.
So
Everyone gets
whether or
punished
not
except
that
for
has-
Xander.
like, that's
Don't
not
have sex,
fair.
guys. That's pretty much what this is all about.
Yeah,
Just
this
don't
is
have sex.
exactly the
Just-
abstinence
just
talk.
stay away. People will turn on you.
Your boyfriend will lose his soul. if
He
you sleep
will
with
try
him.
and kill you.
Yeah, write that
He will try
down.
to kill you.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about, like, because we keep bringing up Xander and stuff, like some of the side characters, people like Willow and Xander. What are your thoughts on them then, as far as like when you were first watching it? And I know you kind of brought up how Xander is kind of, not even kind of, he is probably now. Between watching it then and taking out, what are kind of some of the key differences with some of the supporting players on the show?
Oh.
And whoever wants to
I think it's
tackle
really
it.
interesting how Xander and Willow really flip-flop across the lines of like what best friends are, especially when it comes to just how many times they cheat on each other with other people or other people with each other. Just how much they do that, because their relationship is so unresolved and so nebulous. And that honestly really annoyed me. Every single time that happened, I was just like, throw the pair away. Like, this is ridiculous. Like,
Because like,
I don't know.
because
So
at that point,
was-
at that point, she was with Oz, or like starting to like meet Oz and like thinking of dating him, and then Xander was secretly like hooking up with Cordelia, and then he ended up dating Cordelia, and then for some reason in season 3 they kind of like act on some of that stuff a little bit for I mean, I never understood like the real reason. I guess it is because there was like there's a lot of unresolved stuff there, because she had a crush on him at the start of the show, and he never really, because he was so into Buffy when she first got to Sunnydale. Their relationship is interesting because it does kind of like cross these kind of lines of like, oh yeah, they're best friends, but he doesn't really like pay attention to her the way that she should be paid attention to, at least in the beginning. He's also, I mean, Xander's also inherently very selfish as a character too. That's just my opinion on him. And it sucks too, because he was growing up like the funny guy, and he seemed like, the nerdy guy that's who you wanted to be on though. But he does a lot of things, like rewatching it, even early in the show, that kind of are like, oh wow, I can't believe I didn't really notice how problematic he was in the beginning. Like the hyena episode.
Just as a whole dynamic.
I'll give you examples. I've
like
got
the whole dynamic between
millions.
like Angel and whole
jealousy.
The whole jealousy thing, and it's just because I feel like Buffy made it very clear from the beginning, like, we're good friends, we're cool,
we're friends,
and and he nice guy trope real early.
Yeah, he's the definition of that insecure guy, the nice guy, like you just said, who expects his kindness to be paid with sex, or to be paid by Buffy becoming his girlfriend. I'm nice to you. I'm around you all the time. I helped you fight the dead. you should get with me. But she's not attracted to him, and that can't be. So he's going to be mean to her about it. But there's like, I mean, it was quite the journey, wasn't it, Kara? All the way through season 1, because I also used to really love Xander. He was funny. He was relatable. He was down to earth. And then much later in the series, right, he's like suddenly becomes wise, and he like, you know, he sees it all. He's like the loyal best friend. But when you really dive in and you listen to what he's saying and you watch what he does to Buffy and Willow and Cordy in those first couple of seasons, it's problematic. It's awful. Just to name off a couple things off the top of my head, he watches Buffy change without her permission in season 5 of season 1.
I forgot about that.
Episode 5 of season 1. Yeah. I'll never let that go. I'm never going to forget that. When he does one day tell Buffy and Prophecy Girl that he is into her, that he wants to be together, she very kindly says no, you know, like, I don't see you that way. And he gets mean and angry. And he starts lashing out at her, and we can chalk this up to him being young. But at the end of the day, it's because he literally thought that him telling her that would be enough to make her his.
Mhm.
So and he doesn't see these problems in himself. He doesn't get it, and he never does, and he never learns from it because he's never called out on it. And I think that is a big issue when young men are looking up to this character and being like, this is a great guy. Look at all his friends. He saves the world. But really, when you look at what he's doing, his kindness, I put in quotes, it's all for himself. Like you said, Gaius, it's selfish at the end of the day.
And you know,
it's sneaky.
It comes out a lot too in the season 2 episode where he wants Cordelia to fall in love with him, and he casts that spell. And instead of Cordelia falling in love with him, like basically like every girl in Sunnydale falls in love with him. And he does that because like he's been rejected by her. And you can kind of bring up that like, oh well, she was being stuck up and she was thinking more about her friends and like what that relationship kind of like meant for her and her social standing. But him like going behind her back and forcing Amy to cast that spell, because he's very, very aggressive with her as far as like getting her to do it.
He blackmails her.
He blackmails her. Yeah, he blackmails her in the casting the spell to get Cordelia. And then it backfires, and just every woman in Sunnydale falls in love with him. And so trying to kill each other because they all want to be with Xander. Like that's
a problem.
That's his like, but that's his. It's weird like to look back on it, because like even an episode like that at the time when I saw it when it first aired, I thought it was just like a funny, wacky, episode. But if you look at it,
who doesn't love it?
Yeah, and then you look at it now, it's just like, I forgot he blackmails Amy into doing this stuff for him. And
but it's also like what happens at the end of that episode. Remember, Buffy is in love with him in her head, so she tries to have sex with him, and he's like, oh, I can't do this, it's not right. And then at the end of the episode, she comes up to him and thanks him. She's like, what a great guy you are. You know, you didn't have sex with me when you tricked me into loving you, and then I wanted to have sex, and you said no. You're nice for that. But like Cara and I were like, no, you're not. That is the bare minimum. Like, is the bar truly that low for you, Xander? You didn't sexually assault your friend. Like, it shouldn't be this way. But this was a standard then, and we see it differently now.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's so. Yeah. If she really did thank him, like, oh buddy, oh pal.
Yeah, you're so nice. Oh, I love having you in my life.
Oh man.
But I mean, I remember watching that. Obviously, as I was watching this, probably like 2010-ish for the first time. I didn't know anything about like friend zone, nice guy, anything like that. But I do remember thinking like, oh yeah, this character was written to be immature and annoying. Funny, very funny, very cute, but written to be obviously immature and annoying. So like, to me, it always made sense why she wasn't into him. Because he was just that guy. And like, yeah, he lashed out for being pigeonholed as that guy, but like I don't know, it felt organic to me. And yeah, I look back at it now and I'm like, ooh, that's not great. So glad
Yeah.
that was on TV for
Yeah.
I think
15-year-olds to watch.
I think that he's just maybe he's one of the characters that has the least amount of growth for the entire series. And I think that behind the fact that I do good, I saved the world. Sort of like toxic masculine, like justify do the good deeds that he does, and develop him. I think at the end of it, has grown beyond him as a person. He behavior, but she looks like most of the other characters sort of do which one of the world is like Buffy. Thanks. His behavior. It's like no one really calls him out for it. They're allowed to continue to go.
Yeah, and that's like a super dangerous thing, especially for young teens teen show for guys, especially where it's like, listen, like as long as you're like genuinely like pretty much a good guy, like you can get away with bad behavior because like you're doing mostly good. It's not really a very good stereotype to live up to, where it's like, yeah, no matter what, as long as you're like fighting for the good side, you can still do a few bad things and it's fine. Your friends will pat you on the back and say it's okay, like you did save the world.
Yeah, we often get called out by people for our Xander slander.
Xander slander? Is that what you just said?
Yeah,
That's what we call it on our
we've
side.
made a name for ourselves on TikTok.
I love it.
Hashtag Xander slander.
I love it.
Hashtag.
But people come to, yeah, like Kara's saying, like people have literally written into us or been in our comment section defending this man. And they like, because they have such nostalgia for his character, right? And so did we. Like it breaks our heart. It breaks our heart to have to do this to him. It really does, because we used to love him too. But like, we got to say what we got to say, right? And what you're saying, Owen, is that that's dangerous. This is dangerous behavior that upholds a lot of standards for men that should not be upheld. And you have to call it out at this day and age. It's important.
Well, and especially as Hayley pointed out, he doesn't get called out in the show, right? Like, our response anytime somebody says you have too much Xander slander, it's Xander does have heroic qualities. We won't deny that. He does do good. But the problem is that unlike every other character in this show who acts out and goes awry and gets punished for it, Xander doesn't. And at the end of the day, if the show's not going to hold him accountable, we have to hold him accountable.
There you go.
Exactly. And they even allow Xander to, like, at the end of season 6, he saves the world basically. Like his love for his friend.
I have
like
thoughts on that.
Until
our podcast gets there. Yeah, I don't think that's a good thing. I think like back when I was younger and I watched it, especially as somebody who was just figuring out that she's aromantic, I really appreciated the idea of, friendship's going to save the world. But I do think there's actually a very toxic element to positioning Xander as this hero stopping Willow from her mission of revenge. And that's all I'm going to say on that for another year and a half or so.
Well, I would say that he never quite earned that position to do that. And he kind of like, even though like you said, we look at him through this like nostalgic lens, like there's an argument to be made that he like digresses a lot throughout the show. Like he doesn't really have like someone said that he didn't really have like character growth, like compared to some of the other people. And he is probably one of the most judgmental characters on the show too, when it comes to like other people's choices, particularly Buffy's choices, but that has a lot to do with like, his feelings for her. But like, he is very judgmental when it comes to what other people do on that show. And you're right. Like I just rethinking about it now, he doesn't get called out on almost anything that he does ever. And then when it is something bad, it's done away by like, oh, it was a spell, or you were possessed by Aina, or like
magic. There was magic happening.
It wasn't your fault.
That has a lot to say about Joss Whedon.
Yeah,
he's a
it does.
It's a Joss
Whedon.
That says more about Joss Whedon than it does just about anything else.
Guys, I said this in our episode when we talked about Joss Whedon before, guys. His name is Joss, so I have never taken him seriously whatsoever. Like, just his name in general is a fake Josh. So he's trying to make something else up for himself just in general based on his name. So I will never, I will die on that hill that no matter what, if his name is Joss, I don't take him seriously.
That is fair. That's fair. Yeah, we'll talk on him a little bit towards the end because I know that, you know, of course, with like the show milestone, like when all this stuff started to come out about him, and some of us have heard these things like a lot over the years, and they really came into the forefront a lot more recently. It does make you really like, I guess, reevaluate the show too, because like, you know, just talking about Xander feels like he could just be like a stand-in for, like, that's Joss Whedon. That's who he was in high school.
That is
and like that's them, and and that's why he wrote them the way he did. And you know, it makes a lot of sense what we know now that we know in hindsight. You know,
he doesn't punish himself. He doesn't learn from his mistakes. He blames women for everything.
Yeah.
My problem with Joss Whedon is that he just continuously kills all of his characters. Like, he did it in Buffy, he did it in Dollhouse, he just kills everybody. And I was like, you know, why are you getting me attached to these characters and then killing them?
And then get rid of them. Well, you know, I will say, like, from like going from like the first season, which is more of like a, like we said, Monster of the Week, even though there is like a kind of overalling sort of way in the season where there are actually of the week episodes, but you finally get like a more serialized format with like what's going on with like Buffy and Angel, and then they introduce like Spike and Drusilla, who are, you know, for a lot of fans, some of them like some of their favorite villains on the show. You know, as far as like where the show went, season 2, it doesn't have to just be season 2, but like season 2, 3, and on, where things become more serialized. Like, what are your thoughts on like how the story is going to work themselves out, like when they start to kind of move into that format?
So for me, I started watching when season 1 came out. I think I was in like towards the end of elementary school, and I remember watching like one of the early first season. And if you guys remember, like season 1 vampire makeup was horrific and scary.
Yeah.
Which was
like,
great.
It was great, but like it was scary. I'm a scaredy cat, but like I didn't come back to it until I started maybe like season 2 or 3. It was in syndication, and it was like on FX, and you could watch 2 episodes and 2 episodes in the afternoon. And so like I'm pretty much catching up in real time, really quick.
Nice.
I really loved was just a really good way of like building their season, and it didn't feel like they were just kind of writing like just, I don't know how to explain it, just like coming out the ass of like what how to wrap things up at the end. Like it really felt cohesive for the most part, and how like they'll hint to you what the big thing is like in the beginning of the season. If you're paying attention, you suss out like what's going to be the big bad for us.
Yeah,
within the end of the season.
Yeah, they're really good at dropping clues like piece by piece. Like with the mayor, like, you know, first we hear rumors about him in season 2, right? We hear mention of him by a couple characters, and in season 1 even Snyder mentions him, and then in season 3 you meet him, but you're like, well, what's so bad about this guy? And then slowly they show his nefarious side over like slowly over the season. We get more pieces of him, then he disappears for a while, then he's back, and like they're growing that doom feeling around this character, and it really does him justice. So by the time we see what he's all about and the ascension and what he's capable of, it's so earned, and we're right there because we've been hearing about it. We're waiting to find out what happens with the mayor. So in that kind of story building, like unheard of before the show, but it's incredibly gratifying as a watcher, as a fan. It's like, you know, it's like it's just great. Like I don't know how to describe it.
I think the mayor is probably like my favorite villain out of all of
He's
them.
He's my favorite villain too. He's my favorite villain like throughout the entire series, and like, you know, it's interesting too because Buffy was like the first, I think, like serialized show I can remember like getting into as like at that age. So like everything, like in season 2, when all that stuff happens with Angel, and then it ends the way that it ends, it felt so big to me at the time. I was like, well, where can the show go from here? Like I was like, are they ending it? Is this it? Because it felt like it felt like you can't come back from that. Like it was just like, all right, like okay, he gets his soul back, but now she has to like kill him and send him to like hell to close that portal. So now
Also Xander's fault.
Also Xander's fault, because if he would have just told her, yeah, exactly. That's if he would, you know, and he doesn't tell her for his own selfish reasons. I'm glad you guys have like made me realize a lot of this. I kind of forgot
Xander
about it.
slander.
Xander slander. Well,
I totally
been holding on by nostalgia. That's
Let's all
I
get
totally forgot.
I'll get a
If he
tattoo.
would-
Xander slander.
Yep.
If he would have just told her about the spell, like it, and like he can kind of explain that away as like, oh, you would have held your punches, you wouldn't have did what you had to do, but
No, but
for his own self,
nothing happens until season 7. It doesn't
Yeah.
ever get brought up until
No.
the very end of the series.
yeah,
Because again,
he waited like
Xander never gets punished.
But like, and like you said earlier, like he's judgmental and he makes these like choices and he thinks himself the hero, but you had no right to put yourself in the middle of that at all, Xander. Sorry, I talk to him a lot when we're it's like so
Push the
bad.
dialogue.
That conversation's
So,
fun.
yeah, and the thing, Mayor too, why I thought he was such an interesting villain. One, he was like the sense of humor was great. He was funny, and then that kind of like the kind of satire and jokes and playing on how like politicians are evil and all that stuff too. But then when Faith gets involved with him, and there's and where he seems like he genuinely cares about her. Like he's not really just using her as like an instrument of evil. Like he kind of like
Father figure.
she seems like a wayward soul. I want to help her, and she has no
Almost like
guidance
a
whatsoever.
pet.
Yeah, I guess he did, but he did, like, because when she gets put in the coma by Buffy, he's genuinely hurt that she is incapacitated. Like it showed that someone like him, someone as evil as him, had some kind of feelings. Like he was like, he established this relationship with her that actually meant something. So I thought that was like what made him more interesting to me compared to a lot of the other villains, is that there was like all these layers.
Yeah, we talk a lot about love for creatures that don't have souls. Vampires like Angel and Spike, the mayor, and the big bads of the season, because a lot of the times they can show a level of affection for a character or their minion or whoever. So the question we ask ourselves a lot is that love, or is it,
Wow.
a dark sort of obsession that comes out as love? There's a lot of like, that's what's great about characters like this and writing like this, is because there's lots of nuance. There's a lot of areas. Everyone can have an opinion, and it's not ever wrong. You might feel like it's very right, but like it's a great way to debate whether or not the mayor actually loved Faith, or if that was also a possession, obsession,
Power grab.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I do kind of want to ask you guys a little bit more about Faith too, because I know Owen didn't really watch, but like basically when the Slayer dies, another one gets, I don't want to say activated, really cheesy, but another one gets chosen.
I want to say, like, it's okay that Owen hasn't watched Buffy. You keep bringing this up. You keep reminding us that Owen hasn't watched Buffy. It's okay.
We
Owen.
forgive
We
you.
forgive you.
Yeah. Hey guys, by the way, I haven't seen it. But no, I'm very much enjoying like just the dialogue that is going on. I mean, I think seeing it for the first time now, and kind of now having this dialogue in my head about, gosh, I am going to be watching Xander with such a close eye. I know that for a fact. But I don't know. I think the one thing that I wanted to ask was like, with this whole like monster of the week and stuff, and then like the only thing that I can kind of really compare it to is watching episodes of Supernatural. I know they're not really the same, but like that's just kind of in my mind like similarities and stuff like that to it. But that show did legitimately scare me at points. Like, was there moments and characters? Do you have a moment like what was the scariest part? Who was the scariest monster or villain? Like, do you guys have like a list like that? Maybe a top couple that like legitimately frighten you, especially when you're watching it as a kid.
Yes.
Jeanette's ready. Jeanette's ready.
Oh my god, I have a friend that I talk about this. The one that scared him the worst was the gentleman, the ones
Yeah.
that
Oh,
steal
Hush.
your voice.
That's still your
The
voice,
one
yeah.
that scared me to death was that one that kids can only see when they're sick, and he comes and he like
Oh.
sucks
Kinderstad.
out your soul with his like creepy eye sucker. It was the worst. It was so unacceptable. It was a great villain. So scary.
Yeah. That episode's frightening. It's like Hush is the one that gets me.
I was really affected by, I mean, really early on, Witch, Catherine the Great, Amy's mother.
Yeah.
I think if episode 3, but like that was a really scary dynamic for a mother to switch her body with her daughter and take her youth like that. I felt that. I don't know. That was scary for me.
Hayley, what about you?
To me, it was Niall, the one that Willow when she came back. Is it Niall who was in the camp?
No.
He was
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
creepy.
The child, the deaf one. He gave me nightmares. But I used to be terrified of the Master as well. When I first started watching it at 9 years old, the Master it was really quite scary. Yeah, I think now for me was the. I don't know, for me it was almost like he was the one that like you didn't think that they were going to defeat him. Like that was it for Willow.
I was only because it kind of raised the stakes. Because at this point, no one that we knew that was close to the show had really died. The episode Passion where he kills Miss Calendar, only because like they had really lost significance, and Angel's the one that kills her. And it's not that it's scary; it just completely caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting them to kill her and then kill her the way that they did. He like breaks her neck, like just
damn.
It's just like so aggressive and like it's just like it's very it was very like jarring at the time because like she was a very likable character on the show and like liked it because like she was like into Giles and Giles is like charmingly British and just so awkward around her and
Charmingly befuddled.
Yeah, he just like and he really cared about her and then they kind of had that falling out because she ended up being like family of gypsies that cursed Angel with his soul and she didn't tell any of them about it. So then they were trying to kind of get back to it and then they knock her off like that. It was like completely surprising to me at the time. At that time I thought all my characters were safe on the show. I wasn't expecting anyone to really croak unless they were like a big bad or like someone evil on the show. But when it was like, all right, now I guess no one's really safe if they're gonna just start killing people off like that all willy-nilly. So yeah, that one gets to me a bit because like I just remember that image of like just right there when she's running up the stairs, like it's at the top of like the high school inside, and it's dark, and he just like appears in front of her and just snaps her in the window and just snaps her neck. And it's just and then it's creepy how he lays her out for Giles to find her, lays her out like in his place, like on the bed, like with rose petals. So he thinks like it's her that set up this like kind of intimate date, and he allows Giles to find her just dead, like right there on the bed. It's like so like that's honestly in hindsight like one of my favorite episodes. I just think it's well done as far as like this Angel is very dangerous at that point. And they needed to prove it.
I think that they needed you to be with Buffy, ready for him to die, because I think that we'd gone on this such a journey with Angel transitioning to Angelus, and we had learned about Angelus and how evil he was. So I think we'd seen it from afar, but there wasn't that personal connection yet, and I think that they played it out like this. So we were ready. We were like, okay. We're with Buffy now. This guy needs to die, and it adds that extra.
They need to give her a reason to do it. Yeah. They need to give her a reason to like want to do it.
Mm-hmm. There were two like I guess monsters of the week in the early seasons that were a little too realistic for me. There was the episode where John Ritter was a guy that Joyce was dating for a little bit, and nice guy, but like the little too nice.
You could tell something was off.
Yeah, and it's just like, now I'm going to question every dates from here on out because I don't trust you. And then there was the episode where Willow meets her guy that
I wrote about you, Jane.
Yeah, and like especially like when you're and like that's the internet's really starting to become pretty big at that point. And talking to these people online that you've never met before, and stranger danger, like those hit a little too close for home.
Wow. Yeah, don't trust anyone you meet online, pretty much.
Right.
So I want to bring it back to talking about comparing it to Supernatural, as Owen was kind of asking about, since that seems to be a good touchstone for you, Owen.
Yeah.
But just really quickly, I do want to correct something, Gaius, when you were referring to Jenny and her ethnic origins. It's more appropriate to say that Jenny is Romany rather than using the G word, because that is considered a slur by those people.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, so Supernatural at its core, right, is a show about two adult brothers who have a desperately codependent relationship and really need to go to therapy. And Buffy at its core is a show about a group of friends who are growing up as teenagers and finding themselves as adults and constantly being pitted against each other, basically, by forces of evil. And for me, you know, there are two moments in this show that truly resonate as kind of those moments that you were talking about of just utter devastation. And one is in season 5, when ever so casually, the very end of the episode, the extremely elite Watchers Council representatives show up, and they just walk in, and Buffy's like, okay, I'm going to quit the council, and then you're going to work for me, which is great. It's badass. And she's so confident, and she's like, tell me all about Glory, the big bad of season 5. What kind of demon is she? And the response from the council is, she's not a demon, she's a god. And that's the end of the episode. And at that point in time, Buffy had never dealt with anything like that. She had just been dealing with monsters of the week and demons and vampires. And so this idea of a god, like what was going on? And then similarly, in season 6, at the close to the end of the famous musical episode, Once More with Feeling, Buffy reveals that when Willow brought her back to life at the beginning of the season, Willow pulled Buffy out, not of hell, which everybody was assuming, and that's why they thought Buffy was so sad and mopey. Willow pulled her out of heaven. She had died at the end of season 5 and got her reward for fighting evil. And then she was pulled back to the icky, gross mortal plane. And to me, that really, like, I see echoes of that in Supernatural. You know, and a lot of the people who wrote and produced Buffy ended up working on Supernatural. And
cool.
You know, we see these main characters in both these shows kind of get punished as they go through, and they're really put through the ringer. And one of the things I like about both of these shows is how with each season, they kept raising the stakes and building the mythos of the show. I remember when I was first watching Supernatural, the beginning of season 4, they introduce angels, and this whole Christian mythos opens up, and you're just like, what? And it's the same thing with Buffy. Every single season, something new comes along that changes the game for all of the characters. And I think that's why the show endured in its popularity for so long.
What I think is so cool about that too is that in pretty much any other type of show, like if you did a superhero show or something, or just like a detective show, like escalating it to the point where it's pretty much there's no other way to go. Like let's just say in Law and Order SVU, they're stopping terrorists from detonating a nuclear bomb. Like that just doesn't seem realistic. Whereas when you kind of have this, like you were saying, Cara, like this mythos, there's not really a ceiling where it's like that's too far. So having the ability to kind of go into all these different directions and take all these different characters from lore, it's like, yeah, I can see that they now have to deal with something like that rather than a realistic show that just takes it above and beyond and becomes super unrealistic.
However, I'm going to disagree with you a little on that. Buffy ended after 8 seasons, right?
Seven.
Seven seasons. Thank you. Supernatural should have ended after 8 seasons because they ran out of villains.
They did. They got to the point where they had to kill God.
They did Lucifer in like the 3rd season or something like that. I also haven't seen Supernatural in a while, and I was like, they ran out. They should have stopped at the Leviathans. That would have been a great last season, because everything past that, we're like, okay, we have personification of evil who's female. We have like the devil's brother. We accidentally left our brother in hell, and then that never shows up again. Like, it was just, yeah, they ran out of good villains.
Gotcha.
And so that's why I'm honestly glad that Buffy didn't run any longer than 7 seasons. I personally don't think it should have gone past season 5.
I agree with that.
I want to bring that up too. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up because for a lot of people, season 6, I guess 7, but 6 is like very divisive amongst the fans. Like, I know Sarah Michelle Gellar herself doesn't really like season 6 because she's like, I didn't even realize that was playing anymore. It just wasn't her. And like, it's a very dark and depressing season. Joss Whedon would tell you that it's a season where life is a big bad, and it's like that's why like there's no real like evil presence other than like the trio of nerds, and then eventually Willow becomes like the big bad for the last 2 episodes. Even though as a fan, I guess I was like happy it went along because there are some good episodes in season 6 and 7, but it seemed perfectly wrapped up in those first at the end of season 5. Like, having her make that like ultimate sacrifice to do that seemed like the logical place to end it.
Wasn't that the plan though? Was to end it after 5 seasons, and then it was just going to be insular, and they're like, cool, that's it. And then the fan backlash was so huge that they were like, oh, we just kidding, we're going to keep going. Well, and so season 6 was really, it seemed like it was written on the fly. And like
the contract for the actors was 7 seasons. So Joss Whedon wanted 7 seasons. Yeah, I was just reading the new book that's coming out next week, Into Every Generation a Slayer is Born, by Evan Ross Katz, and he does a ton of compilation of history and interviews about Buffy. So the contract for all the actors was 7 seasons. But what happened was, when they were coming up to the end of season 5, WB wasn't sure if they wanted to order more seasons. So that's why they wrapped up the plot of season 5 as they did. But then there was a little bit of a bidding war, and UPN ended up buying the broadcast rights. So that's why the show moved networks for season 6 and 7. And Joss Whedon handed over the reins, the day-to-day stuff in season 6 to Marty Noxon, because he went to go produce Firefly. And like, I don't want to lay the blame at Marty Noxon's feet for season 6, because Joss Whedon's name is less associated with it, he still was involved in the day-to-day stuff. But he
talks a lot about it too. Yeah, he knows what's up. Yeah,
there was a lot happening in season 6. There were a lot of changes, so I don't think it was any one thing that we can point to and say this is why season 6 isn't as good, if you even believe that. I think it was like everything was changing all at once.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of, it definitely wasn't the show that you had grown up with either. It drastically changed in season 6. And like, I know in retrospect, some of them have said like, well, our audience was getting older, so they were getting older with us, so that maybe they could have like gone on that ride with us for especially season 6. But it's especially dark. I mean, like, there's some stuff that happens in season 6 that like there's the whole stuff with like Spike assaulting Buffy towards the end of that season, and there's just a lot of stuff that year that it became kind of hard to root for. There are some strong elements that season, like some strong individual episodes, but like some of the characters that you even loved a lot just aren't recognizable anymore. They're not like the people you kind of were riding with for those first 5 seasons.
I think there are a lot of season 6 which were great to explore and more into the later series. And season 7, but so much going on in that season and so many dark things that are being explored. Hasn't really got explored with them. It's like little series, like Buffy is like very next again. It was again going to because it wasn't ever really resolved. But
Yeah.
the big bad effectively in series 6 was left, and I think
Yeah.
Buffy was it's different. Things like that. And I think there's time to have what series 6 the best it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to certain I can understand around like this is a mess. I think it is a mismatched series, and I agree with you should have backed up to right. But there's lots more to explore on the shoot cam. I think we would have got the story wrapped up, but I think that it's a mood setter for me. I can watch it one time and then really not feeling this at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also can't imagine going to heaven and then having to go back to Earth. Like that's no wonder
that's
she would.
That's why she's so. That's why she's so pissed off.
No wonder
That's
she
why
was upset. Yeah.
But
I agree with Hayley that there are some really like good, and Gaius, that there are some really good emotional themes that are really interesting to explore. However, that's not why I watch Buffy. I can watch something else to explore those themes. I watch Buffy for the camp, for the characters, for
the levity,
the overall mood. That season, I was like, this isn't the show that I enjoyed watching.
Well, I love Buffy for she's a hero, right? And in that season, she loses that, and that's hard to watch. And that's why I don't find the joy in that season. But then we get it back in season 7, and I actually very much love the series finale at the end of season 7. I think they got it right. And as much as I agree that season 5 is probably where they should have ended it, I am glad that it brought us to season 7 because I mean, we have to rewatch it. You know, maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I always enjoyed
you guys are getting
the
there.
ending. Yeah, well, another year or two. But yeah, I always did enjoy the ending and the girl power of finding community with other women like you. And I really liked that message.
I cried so hard at the season finale of season 7 that my mom actually had to come up into my bedroom and ask if I was okay. And I was like, actually, I'm just like psychotically crying because a character died in this TV show and I'm going to sob my eyes out for 3.5 hours and scare the pants off my mother, apparently.
Yeah.
But that's because
Good for you.
Spike was one of my absolute favorite characters.
Well, they brought him back to Angel. They brought him back to Angel.
Yeah, he came back
in that last season. Yeah, in that last season of Angel. Yeah, he got better.
Which I never watched. Actually, I never watched Angel.
Oh,
Is it worth
It's
watching?
it's very different. Yeah. It goes off the rails too, though. Like season 4 is
true.
But that's when a lot of stuff. That's when a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's when a lot of stuff was going on with like Charisma Carpenter and like Joss Whedon and that is a problem. Yeah, there's a lot going on there, but I think it's good. It's just very different. It's a very different show.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think there's a weird transition to maturity between season 6 and 7 that is, really hard and not enjoyable at all. Like I think looking back at it now, I can kind of relate to season. She's not in college now. She's been brought back. And like she has all these like grown-up responsibilities that she wasn't prepared for. Like season 5, when she died, she was still in college, and then like now she has to pay for the house. She has to get a real job and like have custody of her sister. Like there's a lot of growing pains in season 6 that I wouldn't think anybody would really want to enjoy and go through. And when you get to season 7, there's still those moments where like she's becoming wiser and more mature, but like I don't think everybody else is like catching up with her in that sense, like not understanding there's this for all of this in that last part of the season.
I agree. I also think Buffy kind of went through that problem. Like, I know we were talking about season 6, but like I think that like a lot of teen shows, no matter how good they are, run into that problem when transition out of high school and do the whole college. I even see cracks in Buffy in season 4, where season 4 is kind of, and it takes a little bit to kind of find its footing, and then it kind of like gets better by the end, and then like by the time you get to season 5, like it's kind of like the show that I kind of remembered it was like first 3 seasons. But yeah, I think that like each show, it kind of like there's certain seasons that like some of the narrative tweak and some do. I season 6, I mean, I agree. There's some really interesting dark elements that they explore, and I give them credit for like going there, because like I mean like it you do that in the sense with like that when the characters were so well established, and like you don't want to like change them too much.
Well, it's hard to change, like as you were saying, and kind of how Ricky was saying, it's hard to write adult characters for a show that's about a teenage girl. Like at the heart of Buffy, it was the fact that she was a teenager dealing with all of this. And now all of a sudden she's like 21-ish, and her mom dies, and she has to take care of her sister, who wasn't even her sister in the first place, and she got pulled out of heaven and has to be an adult and go work at like that weird fast food restaurant with like the really
The
stupid
Double Meat
hats.
Palace, or it was called,
Yes.
But like I feel like that's part of the reason why it was so jarring for me, because I was like I can still see like teenage girl in like a college setting, but once you get out of college, that's just like that's a whole different animal, which then makes it a whole different show.
Mm-hmm.
Which then makes it very difficult to write for and make it feel cohesive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
That's
all
what.
agree that the Watchers Council should have been paying Buffy and the Slayers for the work they're doing. So it comes down to patriarchy.
Right.
It really does.
Let's do it. Because I got out of money.
Oh yeah, you have to focus on saving the world, but also you have to work at this fast food restaurant in order to, eat.
Well, that's fascinating too, because because I like, did they even expect the Slayers to live that long? Like even to their 18th birthday, they try to kill them off, right? So they're like, well, I guess she can do her own thing. It's not really our problem.
The prophecy's always like a girl has to come into the world and fight the demons. But nobody expected her to live that long.
Yeah.
Nobody
It's
knew
not
it
just
was new
patriarchy, it's child
territory for the
soldiers.
Watchers. They were like, this girl's still here.
Yeah, and like
What's to do about that?
and most of them kind of ride alone, having like a whole set of friends and like family that they have to they have to take care of. And like she was trying to maintain like this normal life in where she's like, I have this, like you said, this sister that came out of nowhere that I have to take care of, and now she has to do all these things on top of being the one that has to save the world. And yeah, I probably didn't think that she would last that long. And then by the time she hit 2021, they were like, oh, she's still rocking it. Good for her. We had no idea she would still be
chosen ones. These chosen one stories, they're always kids or teenagers. It's like, when are we going to see a 45-year-old chosen one who already has their career and a house and can just, quit their job and save the world? That's what I want to see.
Yeah. And Sarah
Or
Michelle
Slayer.
Gellar too. Sarah Michelle Gellar is telling when they asked about rebooting it, she kind of feels that people don't want to see, at least maybe her as that, and that the show works better as
Yeah,
this
we
kind of
do.
like, yeah. But I think she
Yeah, we
thinks that
do.
yeah, I think that she thinks the show works better as like the kind of like you see her in high school and you watch her grow, and it wouldn't be as interesting her as an adult. And I don't agree with that either. I think there's a lot you can kind of grab from taking her out, when she's in like her 40s and stuff like that too. And like there's so many in that space as well.
Yeah,
I think the
her-
problem is our society doesn't want to have TV show based about a 45-year-old woman, right? Like
Mm-mm.
again, it's patriarchy and how there's no place for older women on the screen.
Yeah.
You either have to be 70 or you have to be under 35. Those are the
I think
only
Veep did a good
ways
job.
to be as a woman.
I think Veep did a good job portraying the vice president. Obviously, that had its own problems with like how they view women, but I mean that's with Seinfeld actress
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and yeah, I mean she was in what was she? She was probably mid 40s, early 50s. I think that was a good example of main character in her 50s.
Yeah,
But
I
can
kind of
you think
also
any others?
yeah.
Huh?
Can you think of any others? Because I can't.
That was just the first one off the top of my head, but I mean that's very recent, and I can't think of any others.
Maybe in the
It's also
90s
a
we weren't ready
half-hour
for that.
sitcom, right?
Okay, yeah, it's a
True.
Like maybe I can think of.
Yeah, I just think
Yeah, I
maybe
don't
in the
think
90s we weren't ready for it, but now
Mhm.
we are, because we all grew up now. Like everyone who was watching it when they're teenagers is entering their 30s and 40s now. So we're ready. We're ready for the reboot where Angel and Buffy get back together. He looks the same and she's 45, and that's what we want to
Look
see.
what they did to the Charmed reboot. Look at what they did to the Charmed reboot and how that completely bombed when they tried to make it
It's
like
not good.
modern and PC and like so cool, and everybody hated it. You've
Yeah.
you've really got to be careful with reboots and bringing back those characters in a brand new light with brand new writers. Like that's why a lot of times I don't watch most sequels or reboots, because I'm like, you are going to turn me against the characters that I remember by
Mhm.
doing weird stuff to them in this new
Right.
like series.
Unless it's the Scream franchise.
Oh, true.
seem to
true.
get it right.
horrors, it's-
They get it right, they get it right,
That's a
yeah.
whole different. Horror
I
movies
think
can
there
do
are
whatever
lots of
they want.
examples of rebooting or revitalizing a franchise, as well as, like you pointed out, examples where it bombs. When I think about rebooting or bringing back the Buffy franchise, I think about Star Trek, and I think about Star Trek: The Next Generation, and how, there were a lot of people who did not think that you could bring Star Trek back as a new TV series. There were a lot of people who thought the show would fail. There was no way you could bottle lightning twice. Where's William Shatner? Where's Leonard Nimoy? Like, why are there all these new characters on a new Enterprise? But they had somehow they found the right combination of talent on screen and behind the scenes, and they had people from the original series writing and working on it. They had new, fresh voices as well. So it can be done. And I feel like the Buffy franchise is similar to the Star Trek franchise in the sense of like, there are more stories out there. There are more Slayers. What if we had, and Disney, you can call me if you want, and I'll help you with this. What if we had like an anthology series where it's like we had a different Slayer each season, and we followed
that's
a
like
different
Doctor Who.
Slayer, and you
The
could go
Watcher
to like
Diaries.
different time periods, different
Ooh.
locations, right? Like,
That would be really cool. I'd love that. But I think that's also because that still keeps the Slayer as a teen theme, which is what honestly my favorite part of the show
Yes.
was the fact that she was just like me.
Yeah.
Right.
And even as I watched it in college, like I'm 22 years old and I'm watching this 16-year-old Sarah Michelle Gellar run around and I'm like, oh, she's just like me. So I think it, yes, I love the the idea of like an anthology, like different time periods, different Slayers. I also, I don't know, I just don't think a Slayer as a 45-year-old is going to be the right choice to keep the franchise going. Like, as much as
I
that's
agree
something
with
I'd
you
rather
on
keep
that.
as a headcanon than like fanfic and like write my own stuff about that, rather than see someone try and do it and make it canon and make it weird.
I would love to see Sarah Michelle Gellar come back as like a cameo, you know, establishing the new series. But and like I agree, like it would be wonderful to see where Buffy is now as kind of like a small component of that wider universe. But yeah, I think if we were to do a sequel series, we need to not be precious with that material, and we need to have people on the creative team willing to take some risks to tell stories that we need to tell now, right? Because that was what made Buffy so popular back in the late 90s, was it was willing to tackle, you know, those things about high school, what made high school hell then. And I mean, some of those themes are enduring and universal, but I think there are a lot of things that we're grappling with now around social justice and issues of like racial inequality, gender equality. Like we need a show that's willing to dive into those things head first. And obviously the references and the callbacks are nice, but it has to be a show that's confident enough to stand on its own. Something where it's like, if you know what Buffy is and you're a fan, you're gonna enjoy it. But if you've never watched Buffy, you can just start watching this show and it's gonna also, you know, rock.
Yeah, which again, Charmed didn't do. It tried way too hard, and I have a friend who has watched Charmed 10 times all the way through. She just starts over every single time. And she was up in arms about the new series. Absolutely up in arms. So yeah, like you just have to be very delicate and gentle, and like you have to do it out of like everlasting love for the characters in the story, rather than the name and the money making, which is what a lot of sequels like reboots are.
Yeah. The interesting thing about you talking about like doing it as an anthology series is that it opens it up to kind of be rebooted and kind of open generation of viewers without being a direct copy, so it doesn't really like upset fans who are like, oh, this is not the version I want to see. Like if it's still like a little bit different, I think that it to kind of like be able to be explored a bit more. Like the anthology series I did, I think is really good. I think that really works.
Well, and if we're talking about it from a production point of view, you know, I know that the Mouse is a very problematic company, and it definitely disturbs me that they apparently just own everything now. But I will give them credit that, you know, look at what they did with Star Wars. They brought Star Wars back. They made Star Wars relevant again in a way that it wasn't before when Lucasfilm owned it. And
a whole nother podcast that we could get into as well.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to make a claim about the quality or enjoyability of it, right? But they have opened up the Star Wars universe in a way that Lucasfilm was not willing to do. And I think that's to their credit there. I think Disney could do some really interesting things with Buffy.
Yeah, and especially if you put it on Disney Plus, I think that'd be cool.
And Disney also, because they own the entire world, can afford to like hire the right writers and actors for it.
But they won't pay them.
You got me there.
So what I want to ask to kind of like wrap this up a bit too is it's kind of like a two-parter, because we did bring up Joss Whedon a little bit in the start of the episode, but I was kind of curious because I remember when about him, and just as a fan of the show, I would talk to other fans who felt like learning these things about him kind of tainted their appreciation of the show. They made them look at the show differently, and you know, in retrospect, I was kind of like, it didn't really do that to me, because at a certain point, I think like these actors and other writers on the show, like they have these characters that we have come to love over time,
Death of the Author?
and it's not like we don't really need to ride the Joss Whedon train for Buffy to really work for us. And I was kind of wondering what you guys kind of felt about that in terms of did it change on the show, and like, and how do you kind of now learning things that you know about him in the last 2-3 years of kind of the headlines and stuff.
I think
And
I think the weird thing about Joss Whedon is that he still managed to write really good characters in spite of him being really problematic. Like, the way he wrote a lot of the female characters, in my opinion, still holds up pretty well, which is unexpected from, like, you can't get that from, like, Roman Polanski or whatever his name is. Like, you kind of are able to separate the artist and the art because he was just that talented at writing. And, like, yeah, looking back now, I'm like, yeah, Xander's a metaphor for just how much of a jerk and I don't know, incel that Joss Whedon thought he was in high school. I don't know. But, like, most of the writing and the storylines hold up well enough that you two ladies have got your whole podcast about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just goes to how important it is to continue critiquing media like this, especially as it ages, because we learn as social media gets bigger and as, you know, celebrity news continues to grow in everybody's lives, it impacts the way that we view these shows. And so it is important to go back and look and recognize where things are good, but also where we know that he has put his little hands in there and it's not right, and you've got to call it out. So that's why Cara and I have such a purpose in doing our podcast, because every episode is there to show us like what they did wrong and where Joss possibly got it right from the very beginning.
And in addition to that, I think we really have to be careful when we're having this kind of conversation. You know, we need to make sure that we're not putting all of the blame for Buffy's problematic elements at the feet of Joss Whedon. Obviously, he contributed to that, right? But I think there's a danger that we turn Joss Whedon into this boogeyman where, you know, there were other people involved in that show. And like Gaius was saying, you know, that results in our ability to kind of separate him from the show. And at the same time, as we're critiquing it, you know, one of Buffy's glaring issues throughout the entire series is its blinding whiteness, right? And to whatever extent Joss Whedon might have been consciously or unconsciously involved in those choices, he was not the only one doing that, right? That was the industry, that was the writing staff, the production staff, all of it. So we do
the 90s.
We try to attribute things to Joss Whedon once in a while, and maybe we get it wrong. But I also think, like, when we're talking about Buffy as a series, Joss Whedon is one person. He had a lot of creative input, but he wasn't the only one. So we can't put all the blame on him. I think the issue with Joss Whedon is in the present day, where yes, there were problems back on the set of Buffy, and we can certainly talk about those as more people talk about the allegations that they're making. But he's still doing it today, right? With Ray Fisher and Gal Gadot.
Ray
and it's
Fisher,
like, why are people still hiring him?
Right.
Yeah.
You know? You don't have the luxury of ignorance anymore.
Yeah, like Roman Polanski, who had to flee the country because of pedophile charges and then won an Oscar.
Yep.
And
patriarchy.
I think for those of us, because we are adults, like this, we have, while being able to critique the show in a different lens, and also at some point, I think like maybe 10 years ago, they were going to talks of rebooting Buffy, and there's if Joss Whedon isn't a part of it, I don't want it. But in hindsight, I think I would be okay with it. I think that knowing what I know now, even when a few years back, even further back, when the things with Charisma Carpenter were starting to come out, understanding that he's not the only thing, he's not the end all be all when it comes to the Buffy universe. There's way more than just him, and still being able to enjoy the show with with new lenses is makes it worth it to see it again. I try not to let what I know about Joss Whedon taint the work that I know he's a part of, because there's so many things that he's been a part of over the years that could be, I wouldn't be able to watch anymore if I did.
Right.
Very
Yeah,
true.
Yes, very true. And like, yeah, Haley.
For me, it's like separate the program, because it's kind of like you said, there's a whole team behind it. It's problematic, and Buffy can be very problematic. So you cannot deny that. But for me, it's like Buffy is forward thinking, and it continues to grow and change and learn. Is rather than with the same job brush, is that or there are further debates or further discussions to learn from them. The problems that Joss caused, and it's exactly I have the same thing with you. Buffy. Because it isn't just Joss' creation, Buffy.
Right.
It reduces the network and that have created Buffy, their version of what they see. And it's about continuing those visions. And if we were to create a problem that the original, it would be pointless, because we wouldn't have. As long as we continue to learn from what this program has produced, is that.
And I agree with that. And what I love about the show's legacy and stuff too, and it kind of, you guys kind of personify that with your podcast. I think with not just revisiting the show because it's fun and like, you know, it's like, oh, let's just rewatch because like we grew up on it and it's fun to watch this together. I love the fact that you guys are rewatching it and critiquing it and looking at it in a way of like, this is what things were like then, and this is how we need to evaluate the show now. And then if other people are discovering the show through your podcast, as you guys are kind of going through reevaluating the show, and they can actually look at it in a more mature light, I think that is kind of like, that is what I love to see about where the show is now for different people that are picking it up. You know, like, you know, people like you guys are really like kind of shining a light on like, you know, what worked and what didn't, and like, you know, and how things needed to change and how things continue to need to but everything is like a kind of teaching tool, and I'm glad that we can kind of use a way to do that. And you know, I like when things can become more than just entertainment. Like when there's something, when there are lessons to be learned, I think that's also a very beneficial thing in this business as well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's still a great show, right? It has all these things that you could critique, and there's things that can change, but at the end of the day, there's a heart there. We keep coming back for more. The rewatch, as much as we're tearing some of these episodes apart, I still love it. Like, we love it, and people.
That's the benefit of rewatching it.
Can you imagine if we didn't? Can you imagine if we just hit the point where we're like,
God,
oh
this
dear,
show.
what have we done?
Gosh,
How
whole series of
how much you hate Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just hate it in the end. No, we love it more.
We are planning to put Joss Whedon on trial in the summertime.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because we have to do bonus episodes where we put characters like Angel. We've done Angel on trial. We're going to do Faith on trial in a couple of weeks. So
Yeah, we
we
fancy
will
ourselves
talk more
lawyers.
about Joss Whedon.
That sounds fun.
yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to thank you all like for not just talking about the show itself, about like what we loved and what we hated, but just having like a bigger discussion about the show as well. And you know, a lot of shows don't have the legs that this show has had. Like 25 years is a very long time, and there are still new people discovering it all the time. And you know, someone said that like Buffy kind of came out in this kind of like golden age of like television. It kind of hit all the right marks at the time that it came out.
For sure.
And and like I said, there weren't a lot of shows like it at the time, and like, you can like kind of attribute it to like, without Buffy, would J.J. Abrams have created something like anything like that, anything that kind of having like a strong female lead and involved in these very serialized, like complex storylines.
I would argue that
think,
Buffy helped kickstart the golden age of television.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. I'm with you on that too. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And like it's really, I don't know, it's the longevity is like really cool to see, and I don't think that shows that aren't as intelligent and have more can last as long as this one did. Point where people are it today. So I love getting to kind of get deep into this with you guys and just hearing the different perspectives of like how you guys have picked up on certain things on the show. I'm still, because I'm gonna rewatch the show again, and I'm still like the Xander stuff is still getting me from earlier. I was just like triggered and remembering like all these things. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like very problematic. But yeah, it's
different.
It's one of those shows it's one of those shows that's fun to dissect. Definitely, it's one of those shows that's fun to dissect and revisit.
I think it's important to remember that this was a show that came out at the very dawn of the internet. There wasn't social media like there is now. There wasn't viral like there is now. There wasn't sharing and online discussion like there is now. And yet this show still managed to have such an impact and an ongoing influence. It's such an incredibly fan base. It's quite remarkable what it's managed to achieve.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had to watch it. I had to watch it in real time back then, and I was recording it on VHS and pausing the commercials so I could actually have copies of it without the commercials on it. That's how much I loved the show back then. I never missed an episode back when they originally aired.
I was a little too young for that. I had the privilege of watching it for the first time on Netflix and just rampaged the whole thing in like 2 months. Something ridiculous like that.
Well, I know, like, at the beginning, Cara and I were saying, like, we were very overwhelmed by the fandom at first because, in a lot of ways, they're, like, ravenous for material, but they have a lot of opinions and they're not afraid to share them, which is great because we're all like that, too. But there is something to be said with, like, when you meet another Buffy fan, like, we're all strangers, but we've met and we have something to talk about that we all care and are very deeply passionate about. And I think that speaks a lot to the show that we're watching. It speaks a lot to what Buffy does to people. We're a family, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
that is are actually family. That's a great note. That's a great one too. I think you're right. How this all kind of connects us. Like I found two of. And then, Hayley and Rickey like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, hey, do you want to do this? And like the willingness to like kind of be able to like to get together and do something like this for like that's the positive side of the fandom, I think, where it's like, okay,
like 2 hours.
Yeah.
I was like, are very busy people.
For love for Buffy.
We certainly canceled a lot of plans to be here today.
Haley's the MVP. She got up at 3:00 in the morning to do this for the UK, so I'm just gonna give her like a round of applause as well. But yeah, as always, Owen is gonna sign us off. I'm just again for being on this episode.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, seriously, guys. Just wanted to thank everyone again for coming on. It's such a cool episode that we get to dive into and do more specific ones like this, and really start to kind of dive into the nitty gritty and have someone like myself who hasn't seen the show and now has all this excitement to go and start watching it. And so I just want to thank each and every one of you individually. I just loved all the input. This is one of my favorite things to do is just sit and talk about TV and movies. So it's always good to do that and meet some new friends along the way, which is great. And to all you listeners out there, just want to thank you again for for tuning in. You can really listen to us wherever you want to listen to a podcast. Apple seems to be the one that continues to be the showrunner, but Spotify. And I think we're going to, Gabe, be uploading this to YouTube. So if you want to see all of our beautiful faces, you are more than welcome to do that as well.
You never told us that.
The disclaimer at the very end.
Cool.
But just want to just say thank you to everyone, and hope we see you guys very soon, and maybe find another little TV show or movie that we can dive into again as well.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Peace.